welcome back to the Space and Grace podcast. Y'all, this is season 3. I am so excited to sit here in my makeshift audio studio space. I'm so excited and nervous to bring you more thoughts, more engaging conversations on season 3. This season, I am challenging myself to be more authentic, to be true to who I am. My first 2 seasons, I wrote every word you heard me say. I literally typed it out and rehearsed it. But it was only because I wanted to make sure I was perfect. But because of that, I stopped recording. So I'm in this space where I don't want perfection. I want progression. I want growth. And I want authenticity. And I want that for myself and for you too. So here we are. Now, understand me well. I research every topic. I am thoughtful in my word choice and transparent in my knowledge. So you will hear me recite things, but I will continue to be as transparent as my healing allows and make you aware of when I can. So if you're still down with me, let's get season 3 started. Welcome to the Space and Grace podcast. I am your host, Tanisha Harris, and I am your CHEO, Chief Honesty and Encouragement Officer. Here at Space and Grace, we focus on healing, laughing, thriving, and loving. And we do that by granting ourselves and others the space and grace to evolve in very practical ways. Y'all ready? Let's do this. Episode 3 in this mental health and therapy series. Y'all still rocking with me? Okay, so we're going to take our time. Let's get ourselves together and let's do some breathing. We're going to breathe in and out. In and out. In and out. Okay. How are you feeling? How are you doing? How have the first 2 episodes served you? Let me know. Okay. Today we're going to talk about choosing a therapist. What I did and what you can do and where you can go to find a therapist. So, if you listen to the second episode of the series, you know that my first therapist was through the employee assistance program with the hospital that I worked at the time. And I was able to call the operator administrator person and basically tell her what I wanted, or at least what I thought I wanted. What I knew I wanted was that I wanted a woman. And that was really it at the time. I didn't really think about, should I have a Black woman, or I didn't think of any of that because I was really just trying to stick with the idea of I'm going to do this, right? So my first therapist was not a Black woman, but she was a good therapist. She really listened. She was really open and she challenged me. What I can tell you though, from what I've learned now, having my 4th therapist, is you need to be honest about what you need. In the second episode, we talked about being honest and open and resting in your truth. When you rest in your truth, you can start to see where the gaps are and you can start to see where you would like to grow. And so because of that, you're more aware or more open to see what you need. So after that first 8 sessions, and I started to learn more about myself, I knew some of the things in which I needed, and I knew I needed a Black woman. So my past 3 therapists have all been Black women. But that was really all I kind of left with. right? So, my second therapist, I was in Nashville, Tennessee. Wonderful licensed therapist, Black woman, just awesome and great. And she was a lot like me in the way of her personality, was very down to earth, and I will hug you. She brought her pets to work. It was very calming. We had sound music, all of those things. And after about 8 or so sessions there, I learned that as much as my soul loves that warmth, I also needed to be pushed a little harder. Because for me, if I'm not, I, I'm so competitive. And so if I'm not pushed or challenged, like you almost have to smack talk with me, and I'm kind of like, got it. I'm the person in my family that will smack talk while I'm losing. Okay. I just want to get in your head. And so I needed to be pushed a little more. And so I was able to switch therapists. We'll talk about that later. I was able to switch therapists. And then I found a therapist that was so much more of a coach. Like we're trying to get to the Super Bowl. And so she challenged me, she pushed me. And there wasn't a lot of room for the, I'm going to give you a hug and we're going to have the sound music. And in that season of my life, that is what I needed. She allowed me to be me. She allowed me to cry. She allowed me to be frustrated. But she never let me leave a session just with the ideas of warmth and hugs. I needed that in that previous season. But in the season that I was in at that time, I needed more challenging. I needed that. So when you're thinking about choosing a therapist, you've already made the decision because we've listened to episode 2. So we've made the decision that we're going to go and we're going to get us a therapist. We need to be honest about what we need. Now, in being honest about what we need, I would suggest you write those things down. Because when you start to research your therapist, when you start to look for your therapist, you're going to want to start to read their bios and read their education and their knowledge and their experience and what they're actually certified in and what their passions are. So, first thing is going to be honest about what you need from your therapist. So I now knew that I needed and I wanted a Black woman. I wanted a Black woman that gave me the space to be fully myself, all my layers, which meant I wanted a woman that was going to be able to have the balance of pushing me, knowing when to push me, knowing when to say, I got you, but you got to go here. I'm pushing you here. But also to say, let's just sit in this for a moment. Let's meditate in this for a moment. Let me hold your hand just right here for this moment. I needed that balance because all of those are layers for me. Now that I knew where my growth needed to be and where my gaps were and what I needed in a therapist, then I could start researching therapists. Now, a lot of times people could just kind of Google therapists. I did that. I even went to Psychology Today. I did find 2 great therapists for there, but absolutely, hands down, the best place for me is Therapy for Black Girls. There is a podcast, Therapy for Black Girls podcast, and the website also has a directory for therapists for Black girls. And it has absolutely been a saving grace for me. And that's where I found my last 2, my actually current therapists, Therapy for Black Girls. And when you are going to, um, yes, Therapy for Black Girls. When you are looking for your therapist, when you are trying to identify what you need, you're going to take that list that you wrote down and you're going to read their bios and what they specialize in. And you are going to compare those things. You're going to see what it is you think you want, how you connect with them, and then you're going to reach out by the means in which they have listed, right? So, We're honest about what we need because we made the decision. We want a therapist. We are honest about what we need. We know that we have some gaps here and we've written those down. We've gone to Therapists for Black Girls website and we put in our city and state and we see tons of awesome, beautiful Black women pop up that are going to like help us navigate this world and help us live optimally, right? So as we're reading through, we're seeing certifications in this and certifications in that and all of these things. And we're looking at what is connecting with us. Now, I'm going to be real with you. With the exception of my first therapist, because that one was chosen for me, my last three, I absolutely went off my gut. That's just me. I felt something. I just knew I needed to go there. And even though I have changed therapists, because for several different reasons, my seasons have changed, I've moved in different states, and so licensure only takes you within the state that you're in. Those therapists have literally been the foundation of me living and navigating this world. And so when I landed on a certain therapist page and I felt it, that's who I went with. So you've identified your therapist, you've emailed, you've called, and they've called you back, introduced themselves, got a little information about you, and said, okay, let's set up a time to talk. Let's set up a consult or intake. That's your third step, preparing to ask questions during your consultation. And y'all, all of this builds because now you're going to be able to ask questions based off what you researched from that therapist about that therapist and what you already know that you need based on your growth and your gaps. You're going to be able to ask her all the questions. You're going to be able to ask, hey, I've really been struggling being a single mom. I have been projecting all of these negative thoughts onto other people, but I think I feel this way about myself. Is that something you can help me with? Is that something we can talk about? Sometimes I feel like so much is happening in the world and I'm overwhelmed. And I've talked to my family and they're just like, just don't watch the news. But that's not enough for me. Is that something you can help me with? I really don't want to be the person that is always responding snappy. I don't want to be the person that's always defensive. I want to be honest in my response and I want to stand firm in my response, but I don't want to be mean. Is that something you can help me with? Sometimes I feel like I need to eat more. Sometimes I feel like I need to eat less. Sometimes I think I may take too much of my medication. Sometimes I'm not taking enough. Sometimes I just don't want to get up. I just want to lay here. Can we talk about those things? Can you help me with those things? What do I need to do to be prepared to handle those conversations? Be honest when you're talking with your therapist, with yourself and with your therapist. Your therapist is not going to judge you. Your therapist is going to push you. Your therapist is going to challenge you. Your therapist is going to call you up. I like to say up. We're not going to call you out. It's not going to be period poo, but it is going to be, I'm going to push back on that. I need you to think that. Calling you up requires you to transcend over things. It requires you to move higher. Your therapist is going to do that. And that's what you want. I don't know, y'all. These are things that are coming from my heart. So, like I've always said, if you want perfection, I'm not the podcast, but I am the podcast for progression. I am the podcast for growth and authenticity. As always, I hope that something resonated with you. You know, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me because we're going to do this together. If y'all ready, let's do it. Always, thank you for listening and sharing your time with me. I hope you heard something that resonated with you, something that challenged you, something that encouraged you, something that loved you. I want this podcast to serve you well. If any of that has happened, please help me with the following. Subscribe, follow the podcast, share with your family and friends. Leave me a review. Let me know your honest thoughts. Send me an audio note and let me know if you want me to include it in the podcast. And send me an email if you have a topic or question you'd like me to talk about. I will have all of the links and the email listed in our show notes. Y'all ready? Let's do this.